Hey friends, Barkey Dog here, back with another movie review. I want to let you know I'm going to be traveling next week, so I probably won't have a new video out right away. But when I get back, the good Lord willing and the creeks don't rise, we can start in on Halloween. so stay tuned for that. This time, we're looking at a movie that may just have been part of a movie duel. Ultraviolet from 2006. A movie duel is when two studios wind up making a similar movie at the same time. Then, they both have to rush to get their movie into the theaters first. Usually, one studio will blink and hold their picture back. That appears to be what happened here with Ultraviolet and Aeon Flux, which I reviewed recently. Both movies began production at around the same time, in 2004, and both have a very similar story about an enhanced female assassin in a futuristic dystopian society fighting the people running everything. In this case, Sony blinked and put the release of Ultraviolet back for a whole year. So, if this was a case of a movie duel, Aeon Flux won handily. Our story goes like this. In a dystopian world of the future, a virus has run amok, sound familiar? And infected people are disappeared by the government, some being experimented on. They're called vampires, but they don't drink blood or anything. They're just faster than regular humans and have larger canine teeth. And they die sooner. In fact, our heroine Violet only has some 40 hours left to live. And they don't know if there's a cure or not. The infected people form a resistance group to fight the baddies, and the baddies are trying to wipe them out. Violet is on a mission. She's impersonating a courier who is going to take a mysterious container from the bad guy's lab. She enters this high-security facility, is found out, and proceeds to kick ass on her way out the door with the goods. She peeks inside this container, against orders, and finds a kid inside. Later, she forks over the case to the rebels, only to find out they want to kill the kid. Apparently, he has some virus of his own that will kill all the infected humans. Well, having lost her own kid during the outbreak thanks to government experimentation, Violet steals the kid and goes on the lam. Now her own people are out to get her along with the baddie and the government forces. Her only friend is Garth, a scientist who helps her out. Can Violet save the kid? Can Violet find a cure in time? And is this movie any good? No, not gonna lie, this movie is terrible. Milla Jovovich from The Fifth Element is our star. Multipass! There's probably nobody else you'd know in this. Kurt Wimmer directed, and he previously helmed Equilibrium. Being a fan of comics, he populated the opening credits with comic book imagery, even though Ultraviolet was never a comic. A hero or heroine is only as good as the villain they have to face. The baddie in Ultraviolet is stock all the way. Nothing new to see here. He's a germaphobe and wears this stupid-looking nose filter thing. But his mouth is uncovered. Dude, didn't you learn about proper masking during the COVID pandemic? As you can see in these shots from a behind-the-scenes featurette, they were using a crap ton of green screen. Because the production was so dependent on green screen, that meant the CGI animation and the color grading had to be really good so everything blended in, it sells the scenes, and makes it all look real. But the color grading is simply awful. Okay, it was 2005 and they didn't have DaVinci Resolve. But the color grading is terrible here. I mean, look at this. I don't see how anyone could look at this shot with human eyes, even in 2005, and think it looked good. And as for the CGI, everything is smooth. There's no texture on the CGI objects, so they look really fake. Like this helicopter. There's a lot of that. It looks like a video game with graphics just one step above GoldenEye. CGI objects, like the motorcycle here, move in a fake, choppy way. It reminded me of how bad it looked when the Enterprise had to avoid an energy blast in Star Trek V, and the ship just sorta shoves over to get out of the way. Awful. And why does Ultraviolet look this way? Because Sony meddled and locked the director and Milla out of the editing process and did a cheap, rushed job. The CGI sequences were just temporary, unfinished placeholders and were never supposed to stand in for the finished work. But that's what they used anyway, and why they look god-awful. But the studio isn't to blame for everything. Director Kurt Wimmer opted to give characters this weird blur over their faces in close-ups that reminds me of those selfie filters that the Twitter kids use. You know, the ones that soften their gruesome facial features and smooth everything out. Yeah, like that. It doesn't do this movie any favors. On top of all that, the 2-hour director's cut was pared down to only 88 minutes. Later, they released an extended cut that was 94 minutes, which is the one I screened. Wimmer and Jovovich have both disavowed the final result, and I can't blame them. This thing had a lot of promise, and it was all dumped in the cinematic crap. This thing tanked so hard, Wimmer was banned from the director's chair for 14 years. These days, he's working on remake rubbish like Children of the Corn, Point Break, and Total Recall, all rehashes of better original movies. He also wrote the screenplay for the latest installment of The Expendables, which is reportedly terrible. Don't know, haven't seen it. Visually, what works best are the real structures. Like this dome thing, that's a real building, or the Shanghai Needle skyscraper. They're different and still stand out as futuristic-looking places. The fights are pretty good too, all swords and gun kata. And I really like the tech here. Violet has this pocket dimension she can access, which is where she stores her guns and swords and everything. Apparently, this is dimension compression technology, though they never seem to call it by that name. It looks cool how the guns assemble in her hands and load ammo. Also, the kid is stored in that container, and that uses this technology. That made me wonder, could she store anything in this compressed space? What about a sandwich? Maybe she's on a mission and wants a snack. Can she just store it until lunchtime or what? Would the food eventually go bad in there? And would it keep a beer cold? Her hair and clothing changes color, and that looks really cool. But why? How? Don't know. I just assumed it was a futuristic fashion thing. They never explain it or why she does it. She also has this gravity leveler thing. This changes gravity's point of view, if you will, so she can stand on walls and stuff. None of this, or how it works, is explained in any way. But again, it does look cool. They also never explain how she can evade the security in the opening of the movie. They do retinal scans and x-rays and everything. And they draw blood by jabbing her wrists with these giant metal bits. And then she's perfectly fine. They didn't even give her a band-aid or anything. But in spite of Milla's best efforts and some cool tech and original ideas, Ultraviolet wound up being a disaster, both critically and commercially. As for Aeon Flux, I gave that one a score of 1 3/4 paws, but maybe I was too hard on it. Compared to Ultraviolet, that thing is a masterpiece. Looks better and makes way more sense. It's definitely the better of the two pictures. Ultraviolet, I'm afraid, was sunk by all of the studio meddling and the lousy-looking visuals, and that's a shame, since I liked Milla here, and the tech in this is super cool. Unfortunately, Ultraviolet winds up with 1¼ paws. I'll be back for Halloween, and I hope you join me. In the meantime, you take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.